Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode number 5 of Nafs and Therapy podcast. Today, I'm joined by Wid Kattan, and we are going to be talking about the faith and fitrah dissonance. And honestly, I'm not going to say more than that because she's going to delve deeper into this phenomenon and into this experience that a lot of women have went through, but not a lot have talked about. So, before we start, as always, remember that this podcast is not meant to be for therapeutic advice, personal advice, or supervision. And enjoy your time with us.
السلام عليكم Wid.
أهلا وسهلا عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. How are you, Noura?
Well, I'm so happy to see your face. Just small context, we went through the same program as well in Cambridge Muslim College. And she was one of the people I've spent some time with when I went to Jeddah. She's one of the people that always inspired me in so many ways to grow and to do things and explore. And so I have a very special relationship with today's guest, just pointing this out here.
The feeling is mutual. Alhamdulillah.
Without further ado, I would love if you could just introduce yourself to us and tell us more about yourself and what led you to have this interest in the spiritual wounds of women.
Yeah. And I feel that this topic of spiritual wounds of women يعني, falls in the area of spiritual psychology and Islamic psychology as related to women and women's mental health. And these are all things that are close to my heart. And it's like an area I feel I've been traveling towards to all my life. And in school, and I had normal studies in terms of Arabic and religious studies from first grade until first year of university. So my area of expertise isn't necessarily the spirituality and religion, but there is enough, inshallah, Arabic and religious background here. But my real expertise is in my path through medical school and then residency in psychiatry and then a fellowship in women's mental health. Did a master's in medical education where I looked at spirituality in psychiatry and residents' attitudes towards that. And finally, the Islamic psychology diploma, which we did together. So it's bringing all of these together. I think this topic brings all of these things that are dear to my heart together. And when I speak about the spiritual wounds of women, I'm talking about myself and my own journey. I'm talking about my friends and my sisters. I listen to a lot of people talking about my clients who come to me in the university, hospital, or in my private practice. So there's a lot of kind of collective stories and material and patterns that I see, which leads me to want to kind of draw. I want to draw the patterns. I want to name the wounds and take people at least as far as I've been able to get on the path of, healing.
Okay, and can you tell us a bit more about that? Can you tell us a bit more about this? Because I don't want to. I'm hoping to be as not necessarily clear as possible, but I'm hoping to allow the listeners to know what do we mean when we say there are spiritual wounds for women?
Yeah. So there's this book, it's called Women Who Run with the Wolves. And in it, I read the word spiritual laceration. Like a laceration is like a really bad tear of muscle and tendons, right? And she had been saying something that, a woman will be going through a spiritual laceration and the society will dismiss it as, she's having a nervous breakdown. And it just really touched my heart. So when I talk about wounds, I talk about trauma, but maybe trauma with the small t, not necessarily the capital T of the DSM or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. I talk about in Islam, if we're taking an Islamic psychology point of view, the little nukta or the little black dots that come on the heart and cover kind of what is supposed to be a beautiful, natural, fitrah surface mirror that can reflect yourself and truth in Allah's world. And one thing that I want to get into in terms of a type of wound is the Fitrah faith dissonance. Shall I go and talk about that term?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So this, I think I got for the first time from someone by the name of Shaykha Iman Badawi. It was one of her writings where she wrote those words, and I felt I understand what that is exactly. And so if we want to break it down, so we're trying for the listener to know, what do I mean when I'm talking about spiritual wounds in general and fitrah, faith dissonance in particular? So the fitrah is a word that's familiar to many Muslims, but some people don't know what it is. So let's define it. And this is one definition. It's like your primordial disposition, your spiritual disposition, the original programming that we got from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as human beings, generally speaking. Muslim, not Muslim, it's a fitrah. And we all have one general same fitrah, and then we have kind of our little nuances, like you have a fitrah way of smiling that's just yours, like the fingerprint fitrah. Then the faith, I'm using it here when I say fitrah, faith dissonance, I really mean faith in quotation marks, the faith given to us, the faith we received, the faith that is not necessarily in its original form, right? Now, dissonance means when two things don't go together and there's like a jarring. We know the term cognitive dissonance. Now, if Allah created the fitrah and He sent and created the faith, these things should be aligned. So when they aren't aligned, it's painful. You could say that Allah gave us like 3 sets of books or ayat. Okay, there is the verses, and in that is the ayah of سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. So we will show them our signs, our ayat, in the horizons and in themselves, so that or until they may know it is the truth. This is a verse. It's an ayah as we know it, right? And it points to the other 2 ayats, which is on the horizons. That's the world out there should also be in line with the verses. And the world in here, that's the 3rd ayah, which is your fitrah, and your heart that knows. So all of these 3 signs, all of these 3 compasses point to one God, because they come from one God. And so they should be aligned. But when you're walking with a couple of compasses, or 3, and they're not all pointing to the same north, then there's something wrong, right? That's the dissonance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they should be in line. Like another reason, or dalil that they should be in line is the ayah, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. It has the deen, the religion, and the fitrah in the same ayah. Incline or raise your face towards the religion according to which Allah created humanity, according to your fitrah. So that's the wound I'm talking about, or the pain I'm talking about, that dissonance. I could go into examples, but where do you want to take this?
Yeah. Because I felt like, okay, I got the gist of it, and I love if you could tell us a bit of an example of how would that look like.
Yeah. So for women, now this type of dissonance can happen to any human being, and can happen to Muslims and non-Muslims. So, but we're talking about mostly women in Islam. So we have so many verses or hadiths, and I think more hadiths than ayat, that causes this dissonance. For example, have you ever heard someone say to you, النساء ناقصات عقل ودين? Women are deficient in intellect and religion?
Oh, yeah.
This can be thrown to you in the middle of a meeting. It can be said over the dinner table. It's a way to just, end your argument or shrug off whatever your opinion is. Okay. Now, if I hear, like as a young woman growing up, my prophet said that I am deficient in intellect and religion, that's so rude. So I'm talking now emotionally. Imagine a young girl hearing that, right? But my experience of myself is that I am not deficient in intelligence. Noura, do you feel that you are less intelligent than most of the men in your life?
I don't think so. No, not at all.
Does research support that? Okay, so Then you're like, what I know of myself as a human being with dignity is that I am not deficient in these things. It's the same thing for religion. Like the first person who believed the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was a woman. So women aren't generally deficient in their religion. So then I'm like, okay, so you can imagine 2 sisters hearing this hadith. And one of them will, so the dissonance, an immature response would be to choose one and leave the other. So one will say, this hadith is wrong, and then reject the hadith, and might reject all of the hadiths and reject the tradition of hadith. And then when you give her many verses and ayat that are so centralized against women and highlighted, she starts turning away from the religion because it doesn't fit what I feel about myself. But then the other girl or sister could choose the other response of, she will suppress her fitrah and what she knows of herself to be true and really try and swallow and comply and submit to these ahadith and ayat, feeling that this is the jihad. This is breaking up the nafs. And each will fall into certain types of pain and woes, because when you lose the faith, it's a problem, and you lose community, and you lose so many other beautiful things. And also when you lose yourself, you actually might be falling into the death that Allah talks about. Have lost, if you have a death, is to hide and suppress and oppress something. أم يدسه في التراب, to press and suppress something into the sand. Okay? So an example, so what do we do with this hadith? Now, going into the details of how to approach these texts, we could delay it for later, but for now I can say that a mature response would pause and discern and say, is this hadith correct? What came before? What came after? And I'll allude to it just in case we forget to circle back. First of all, we're going to provide some links, or you're going to provide some links, please, Noura, for people, including a paper and an analysis of this hadith by Dr. Iman al-Badawi. So, and I want people to read it because I don't want them to just look for quick verbal answers from other people, right? Like me. But the whole hadith anyway has a context where the women were celebrating in the Eid. So you can imagine, and they were singing. So you can imagine colors and singing and beauty. And the Prophet passed by and he stopped to acknowledge them and said, ما رأيت من ناقصات عقل ودين أذهب للب الرجل العاقل منكن أو من إحداكن. I have never seen someone so deficient in intellect and religion, and yet is so able to do away with the mind of a wise, sensible man.
Oh.
So what's he saying? Like, if he's even talking about the intellect of men and women, he just said that men's intellect can be lost because of the beauty of women. He was being playful. He was giving them a compliment as they were singing. And then them and their sincerity and adorableness didn't get the compliment. And they go and say, but how? How are we deficient in, like, what should we do about this? Teach us. And thereby reflecting to him the exact innocence and beauty and sincerity of seeking. And he gives them an answer, but it's not a literal answer. Like, he's not really saying, you're deficient in your religion because you don't fast in Ramadan. We don't fast because you told us not to. It's like, how can we be, like, penalized for that? So the whole hadith is actually a beautiful interaction. Again, people need to understand this is 1,400 years ago in Arabia. So there was a way of speaking, there was language, there was nuances. Yani, even if you feel that this wouldn't be an appropriate interaction now, the Prophet knows what was appropriate then. And then you have other layers of, was this hadith sahih? What else is said about women? How did he treat women? Etc., etc. But so what am I highlighting? When a part of a hadith out of context is thrown at a girl or a young woman, and used against her, weaponized against her. Like, that's how we end the meeting. That's how you don't get your promotion, because you are naqisat aql wa deen, right? Then that's a fitna. Then it's not benign to do that. Then you've put the person into a challenge. But now it's your kuraf mal'abik. Like, the ball is in your court. What are you going to do about your belief in yourself and in Allah and your faith? You have to dig and discern. And for those things that you still cannot find the answer to, you have to be able to sit with them and all of that.
Lovely. I it's the first time I hear this full story about the hadith. I don't think I've heard the full story about it. And just listening to it from this perspective gives so much context. And I think a lot of the times we take things out of context and we just put it out there and as a tool to prove our own biases towards women, maybe. And I'm wondering, how do the women in where you're from, or in your community, or even your clients, or the people that you just connect with, how do you feel when this conflict arises with what they feel, oh, this is not my fitrah, but this is what I'm seeing around me, how do they deal with this conflict? And as you said, they might like stray away or sit with it. But from your experience, how do you see this really being played out in real life?
Yeah. طبعا it's very variable across, I think countries and across regions and even within the same families. Like if I think of me and one of my sisters and how we took in the same religious teachings, it's very different. I had more of a tendency to try and stick with the texts. That's why I got hurt in that direction and say, maybe I don't understand myself. Maybe this is hubris. This is pride. Maybe I need to accept that, this is my fate in life to be a woman. And these are apparently the characteristics of women, right? And others will go in the other direction. So we could say there's one of three responses that I can think of. One is you suppress the fitrah. You think you're choosing the faith. So you accept the interpretations, you feel wrong, to let go of them. But then what you get into is inner discomfort. You have psychological consequences. You disconnect from your fitrah, yourself. You mistrust your heart because, apparently I'm full of, this disobedience. And then you start to have anger. And if you can't be angry at the Hadīth or at the Prophet or at Allah, or you'll be angry at the religion. And some people will have anger towards Allah, but to be so afraid that it's unconscious, because if you're angry at Allah, you're doomed, especially if you have a picture of Allah that talks about you in this way and says that you are deficient. Sometimes people get into spiritual numbness, resentment, religion becomes a burden, life becomes a burden. You start to feel, why do I pray and not feel anything? Why do I read Quran and not feel anything? Because the thing that you feel with, which is your heart, has become scarred over. And it needs some healing. So that's one pathway, okay? The other is you reject the faith, and we see this a lot. And some people reject all of it. Like, really? Like so many hadiths that say, I'm mal'una, I am damned. So rahmatullah, which has encompassed everything. Rahmati wasi'at kulla shay. But I might be damned for something I do with my eyebrows or my hair or the way I dressed. Okay, so I'm damned from here. The hellfire is filled with women. Women are deficient. So they leave. This whole thing, this whole religious thing, sarahah, doesn't make sense. They take off their hijab, they leave. But then what is lost? Actually, their rejection of these false meanings could be true, could be good for them. The rejection of false meanings, rejection of indignity, rejection of the idea that you are less of a human being, because they are actually accepting all the verses that say, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, we have ennobled Adam. خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ, we created you from one nafs. So they're actually accepting a lot of the deen, even if they don't think that they are. But what happens is they take one part of La ilaha illallah. It's like La ilaha, and they don't boomerang back. So there is loneliness, struggling sometimes with being agnostic or atheist. You lose the community. And for these women, I'm not so afraid, like when they say, oh, did you see so-and-so stopped praying? So-and-so took off her hijab. I'm like, it's okay. Allah's going to give her time. She needs that space. She'll come back to illallah. She is breaking idols. She's breaking falsehood. She went a little bit overboard, okay? But, it's like a rubber band. If you pull it in one direction very much, it's going to go very far in the other direction. So I have every hope that they'll come. But here's also a lot of wounding, because she has been isolated now and rejected and ostracized. And who knows, sometimes it's even physically dangerous if you're going against your family and stuff like that. So then brings us to the third possible response, which is balance, discernment, moderation. Like the middle path, al-wasat, is always more challenging than the extremes. Both extremes are easier and less sophisticated. Here you hold your questions, you ask, and you sit with the things that are difficult for you. You try to prioritize your relationship with Allah. And then, there are more practical methods that I think I can get into later. But just to know now that there is a middle path.
And I think maybe one of the things that I often hear when it comes to when it either comes to, oh, why don't we get enough, or why don't we get an equal share of the inheritance, or why are men supposed to marry, or are allowed at least to marry more than one? And I always see this this clash between people, and even between I noticed this within my family, that that he can but he can't at the same time. And this just really speaks to our like our inner core of being like, seeing that, we're precious, and we're supposed to be precious in the eyes of the other person, but how could it be that we could be easily replaced or easily endowed with another person? So I'm not sure if you've also seen this as well around.
Completely. Like, so you brought two examples, and there's many. And one of the things like I feel called to say is, we're not going to give the solutions and to all of these things, but I just want to point people to this like window that there are solutions, whether you reach them or not. Like the idea, Noura, is if there is a dissonance, not only do you have permission to question, you have the responsibility to question. You have the responsibility to find ease for your heart, because you're not supposed to just suppress that other compass, especially if you keep in mind that, Jazahumullah khair, all the scholars, most of what has reached us until now is written and interpreted by men. And as great as their ijtihad is, I am sure if you input the Quran and the tafsir into a woman, she's going to have a different experiential knowledge and different interpretations. And we still do not have enough of that. So I'm not saying all of their interpretations are wrong, but I am sure there are still yet untapped interpretations. So I'll take these two examples and tell you how they have been reconciled for me a little bit, because each one, wallah, could take a whole episode, because I've spent so much time on this, because it has hurt me so much. Me and the women. Like, can you imagine? My specialty is women's mental health. So I get to the first wives, and I get the second wives, and and I get the other woman, and I get the man who doesn't know what to do. So I've accompanied people on the path. Okay, so the inheritance is much easier for me, because to say that because you're a woman you get half isn't true. It cannot be a gender thing, because if a man dies, his mother and father will get the same as sudus, or in certain situations maybe a thuluth. So it is much more complex than that. And there are situations where the daughters will inherit and the uncles will not. So women will inherit and men will not. So it is definitely not a simple men take double women. That is one case of many, many cases. And I don't have enough knowledge to do tafsir for that. For the ta'addud, or taking multiple wives, this is one of the things that, alhamdulillah, people started to speak about. You remember with Dr. Maryam Shibani, and she's one of the names and people I hope people to follow. Also, Habib Akande talks about this a lot, like a lot of the sexual practices that cause harm for women. The fact that Muslim men on earth today take multiple wives in the manner that they do does not mean that Allah condones this or that they are okay with Allah. The fact that they have a binding or valid legal document, and that the aqd in fiqh is sahih, or so the contract is legally correct, doesn't mean that they are ethically okay. Okay? Why? Because...
So you're saying like
yes,
ethically and legally they're different things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the Sharia is supposed to have certain things about it that are true. It always has to have maslaha, beneficence, hikmah, wisdom, rahmah, mercy, and there's one or two other things. And if it's not applicable to a situation, then there's a problem. And if it's not applicable to all involved, including, the other humans, the women and the children, right, the other humans, then it's a problem. The same thing, the Sharia is there for the maqasid. What are the maqasid? Why is the whole Sharia or jurisdiction present? To preserve what? Faith. Well, women lose their faith on things like this. Preserve intellect and mind. Women lose their mental health we've all heard the story of the woman who was taken to the hospital when she learned her husband took another wife in secret. Like full breakdowns, right? It's there to preserve al-ird, which is also dignity. So when, let's say, I'm a woman who has been married, let's say, for 15 years, and suddenly I hear that my husband has another wife in the community and has children. I hear. When my heart is broken and I feel betrayed and I realize that my finances have changed and then the sheikh says to me, but he didn't do anything haram, right? He didn't do anything illegal. It's also invalidating to my experience. So now I need to say, as a good Muslim, I need to accept this. Accepting that it exists in some form in the Sharia for some people and some time in some situation doesn't mean I need to accept it for myself. No. Any woman can say this is a deal breaker. And women used to put it in the contract. Habibi, this is a deal breaker, right? And one woman who refused for her husband to take a second wife is who? Fatima, bint Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet was with her. She went to him and said, are you going to let people say that you don't get angry on behalf of your ahl, or your family? And then he said that Ali cannot take another wife over Fatima unless he divorces Fatima. So, and he said, أنا لا أحلل حراما ولا أحرم حلالا. I'm not changing law. I'm talking about my daughter. Now people will say, yes, it's because Ali was going to marry the daughter of Abu Jahl and there was an objection to that particular woman. That's not a good interpretation. And that particular woman is a Muslim woman anyway. She shouldn't be penalized for who her father was. Anyway, Ali didn't take any other wife after that. So Fatima shows you that the law is something and what you individually accept for yourself is another. Set aside, Noura, the big question of this ayah starts, فيها جملة شرطية, it's a conditional sentence. If you fear you will be unjust towards the yatama, the female orphans, then take on 2 or 3 or 4. So this is, I'm not a mufassir, but if then, where are the orphans in the stories we're hearing? Mafi orphans. There. This isn't. So I'm imagining that like after World War I and World War II, and the ratio of men to women is very low, and there are these amazing, excellent, noble men who want to take care of not one family, but multiple. And so he will marry a woman who has female orphans to take care of them and spend money on them and open up their houses. Thank you. Then you have permission. But this is not how people are doing it. And then you need to look at the question of everything that is broken in Islam in a secret marriage. Lying happens, deceit happens, disrespect happens. This is not ashiruhunna bil ma'ruf. This is not, and live with them in ma'ruf. And ma'ruf is everything that is good, everything that is known to be good. How can you disregard all of this and just say, I didn't do anything wrong? And you've broken not the hearts just of the women, but the children also, because it's weird for them to suddenly find out that what, Baba has another wife, and what does this mean for us? And we only have him part-time, and nobody told us.
And I think here's when the faith and fitrah dissonance happens, where, okay, I know that this shouldn't be the case. And in my nature, I know that we should be loyal and we should be in harmony together. But what I'm seeing is something else that is being kind of justified by certain scriptures or by certain kind of explanations as well. And I'm just imagining how broken a person would feel as a woman. Like, this is really heartbreaking, and it makes you question what you know, what you practice, what you stand for, and probably wanting to maybe debunk all of that, or just let that out the window and just find something else that works.
Because you have go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Because you have the heartbreak of the romance, right? Like, excuse me, I thought we loved each other, and there's the heartbreak of the disloyalty, because it's another idea. If they plan this together as a solution for their marriage. Okay, we're going to bring in a third person together. Okay, that's different. But then there's the heartbreak of when the religion tells you your feelings aren't valid. And everything in your body. And when I say, you know how, these books like The Myth of Normal, The Body Keeps the Score, how science is showing us how your body objects. So when women collectively understand that this is it's a betrayal when it happens in this way, and they get sick psychologically, and they get sick because of their immunity. This is all the fitrah speaking. And at least a woman who knows I'm okay in my feeling and I'm validated, and I'm sure if the Prophet were next to me, he would understand and say, yeah, you did not deserve this. Then half the healing is done, because at least now I just deal with a man who doesn't know his religion, rather than me needing to swallow something that is so sour. You know, Noura, when you open a bottle of milk and it smells bad and you gag, you're not supposed to swallow it. This is the same. I think if a prescription feels bad and makes you gag, don't swallow it. This is Allah's protective mechanism built into you to not swallow poison.
How powerful. It gives you the ability to say, okay, I'm not just going to follow blindly. Like I need to have some, I need to have a role in this. I need to have some part of me that is being engaged. Otherwise, we would all just be holding a book the whole time and just saying, oh, this fits and this doesn't, and the law says this.
Yes, so this is why I'm saying, not only do you have permission to question, because people are afraid. They feel that my questioning means I am going astray. No. The ache in your heart means something is already astray. You have a responsibility to question because Allah, like, just as we're afraid, Allah could say, didn't you read this ayah in my Quran? He could say, didn't you listen to this ayah in your nafs? سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم. But you have a heart that's objecting inside. Like, women are objecting inside. All of them are saying, Ya Jama'ah, something's wrong. You know the ayah, إن السمع والبصر والفؤاد كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. The hearing, the senses, the hearing and the seeing. And the heart, and it doesn't use any word for heart, al-fu'ad. Al-fu'ad means the heart on fire, the burning heart, like fu'adi ummi Musa, Musa's mother's heart, because it's burning. And كل أولئك كان عنه مسؤولا. You will be asked about all of that. And mas'ul also means responsible. You're responsible for all of that. So when you have this smoke detector, you have this lie detector, you have this alarm inside you that's begging you to say, we can't swallow this, and you suppress it. Why not fear that Allah's going to ask you about that?
I'm inclining towards I'm really inclining towards going into the case study of the Surat Qariya, that I think would be super helpful at this point, as we're around the end of the first session. I'm going to be mentioning in the beginning that this is going to be a 2-episode thing. But can you walk us through this case study that can beautifully depict some of the wounds that we talked about so far?
Yeah. So this is a story of many stories I've heard. Okay. And I met this woman, and she was just telling us her story, and said she used to love reciting the Quran as a child. She went to the mosque with her brothers, and she recited, and she was good, and she had a beautiful voice. And then one day, as they asked children, what are you going to be when you grow up? And she said, I'm going to be a qari'ah. And the imam, who was a man, in the mosque, in the religious dress, so all of these associations, laughed and said, women don't become qari'ahs. Now, of course, this isn't true, but look at her experience. And then as she grew and got her period, and there were times where she was told that she shouldn't read the Quran or touch the Quran on her period, and this pathway was blocked. And now, as a child, she was able to walk around the whole mosque. But as a woman now, she has to stay in the back. Literally, her brothers could continue, could go forward, could become qari'in if they wanted, qurra. And when I saw her, she was a totally, westernized woman, like dressed very scantily, living abroad, left her country. So she chose, in my analysis, she turned away from the faith, but chose her fitrah. And was like, I just always imagined her. She said, now I read the Quran alone in my apartment. So I see her by the window, sitting alone in an apartment in some European country. And why did she have to choose? And she's young. I know and hope that she's going to circle back and see the integration. So take this phenomenon of not hearing women's voices read the Quran. What is that? So, and what harm is happening? Like when girls don't even know that you could be a qari'ah, that this is a possibility, because there's no representation. And all of it comes from the verse. Shall I get into it? يا نساء النبي لستن كأحد من النساء إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول فيطمع الذي في قلبه مرض وقلن قولا معروفا. Okay, let's unpack this. It starts, O wives of the Prophet, you are not like any other women. So here I question aslan if anything after it must be applied so strictly as it does to them, because they have their own ahkam, right? They can't marry anyone after the Prophet. They're sacred, they're ummahat al-mu'mineen, they're the mothers, they're above. Let's take it. We want to be like them, okay? We want to copy them. Fine. إن اتقيتن فلا تخضعن بالقول. If you are conscious of Allah, then do not be seductive in your speech, so that the one who has sickness in his heart might, like if you are seductive, then the one who has sickness in his heart might be greedy, might want something from you. وَقُلْنَ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, and say speech that is ma'roof, which is everything that is good and known to be good. Great. This is the source that makes that somehow people have deduced women should not read the Quran. Wait, what is more ma'roof than the Quran? When Allah says قُلْنَ قَوْلًا مَعْرُوفًا, say ma'roof speech, what is more known to be good? And if I cannot read the Quran, then for sure I cannot say anything, because if Allah's speech is seductive, God forbid that I laugh, yani, or I sing, or I speak, or I say poetry. So now the softer kind of ahkam or jurisdictions around this have said, no, women can read the Quran, and men who have a sickness in their heart, because even hearing them read the Quran causes, lust to stir in them, shouldn't listen. Fine. But to silence all women, in case some men with sick hearts might be stirred, so protect the men from the fitna, Protect them from, any problems. But the women, you've caused a blanket fitna for all women by telling them, you are not a good vessel to read the Quran. Your voice and the Quran don't go together. And we've seen this, Noura, in the most progressive places also. Yani, like people have a long way to go, where the fear for the men's hearts and for their faith is so much higher, as if our faith is like so safe. Our faith, our faith is really tested in the way that Islam is being practiced. So that story of that qari'ah stays with me. And for me, hearing women read the Quran is so healing. And I'm so glad that there are places where it's not an issue. Apparently, it's not an issue in Morocco. It's not an issue in Indonesia. The women used to read the Quran on the radio in Egypt. I don't know what happened. There was an updated fatwa or something, but it's a problem.
Where do you think this assumption comes from, that our faith is more or less okay, or can maybe handle a couple of jabs, but their faith needs to be preserved in ways and shapes and forms?
Murad, to be honest, I really think, unknowingly, that a lot of Muslim men, including scholars, don't see women as fully human. Really. I feel that women are a topic amongst topics, right? Like, today we're going to talk about the Hilal of Ramadan, and tomorrow we're going to talk about what is halal meat, and after tomorrow we're going to talk about women. And, the more I have healed, the less I have been afraid of Allah, in the sense of Him being a punitive figure, the more I have been able to have conversations with Him and ask, right? And one of my, just to allow the questions to be heard by my own heart. One of my questions is, Ya Allah, why do you speak to the men about us in the Quran? يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ النِّسَاء. They ask you about women. Why? Why do you say, طَلِّقُوهُنَّ, divorce them, اضْرِبُوهُنَّ, hit them? We're going to hopefully get to that one. Why do you say عَاشِرُوهُنَّ, treat them well? Like if it's quote unquote positive or negative, why are you speaking to them, not us, right? And I'm reaching some answers. These questions, you have to live them and you experience them. One is in the Arabic language. Any speech that is looks masculine encompasses the masculine and the feminine. That's just the language. There is no verb that specifically speaks to men. There is for women. So Allah has spoken to women alone and has spoken to men and women together. But there isn't a specific to men, right? So these orders are given to the men and the women, like who are applying jurisdiction or whatever. That's one. The other is, I think it's a reverence. And it's an acknowledgement that the society in Mecca was patriarchal, and the society continues to be all across the globe. Most of history, I think, patriarchal. It's a tendency. It's a tendency of how the masculine and feminine interact, okay? And so they are the ones who need the instructions. So when Allah says, عَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, treat them well in marriage, He doesn't need to tell the women. The women are always invested. The women are always the ones dragging their husbands to couples therapy. It's like, in the ayat where it's lopsided. Allah only talks to us about honoring our parents, but doesn't talk to parents about honoring the children. There's no need. Parents are already taking care of their children. So He speaks to the people who need to hear it and who have the power. Like how many couples have come to you with the man requesting?
Oh yeah, very few.
Yeah.
Very
So-
few.
And when he does, we think, what a great man. We say, what a man, what a man, what a... And the song comes into your head.
Yeah.
So, and I know I'm a baby. I'm going to die on this path, inshallah, and I haven't known. And I have some questions for Allah later. But for now, it's like, Noura, if you told me, so-and-so will take, Rafah told me to hit you. I'm going to say, no, don't you dare. I know Rafah, and I know that she loves me, and I know our relationship. And until I see her and I ask her, don't you dare, I'm going to see her and I'm going to ask her, and there's no application for this right now for me, I feel comfortable doing that with the things I don't understand.
And you mentioned the healing piece that I feel is so it's important to put it here in the surface, that you've done the work and you've done the connection, and you've probably maybe moved away, moved towards God throughout the whole process. And I feel like as a woman who's dealing with women's spiritual health, you're constantly seeing the trauma that they're presenting with.
Yeah.
And maybe my heart breaks with the choice of, this is something that I love and I'm having to step away from it because it doesn't make sense to me right now where I am. And I think we have some room as well to just talk about a bit about the attachment when it comes to these spiritual wounds and the attachment with Allah. And I think it's a beautiful thing to wrap up here as well with this attachment. And I'm not sure how would you like to think about it or to talk about it. So feel free to take it.
I want to refer people to this beautiful study done by Yaqeen Institute. It's the link will be provided, inshallah. Thank you, Noura. It's called Belief in Divine Love, Discovering Spiritual Attachment Styles. And I wanted to bring this up because all of this dissonance is, I think, an attachment wound. Like we can get hung up on the jurisdiction, can a man take 4 wives or not? But in the end, the wound is, Ya Allah, why did you let this happen? Why are things like unclear? Why are we oppressed? All of these things. Or why do I have to choose between, worshiping you and the faith and my heart and you've designed my heart. And if you're okay with Allah, everything's going to be fine. Nothing else will matter. So they looked, and so it was done on Muslim people, Muslim population. They looked at people's self-worth, like, do I feel worthy or not? And their self-image, that's one variable. And their God image, like, do I see God, Allah, as merciful, benevolent, Or do I see him like a policeman giving out tickets? Or is he just there for when I need him, he grants my wishes? They looked at people's attachment style with other humans. Like, am I avoidant? Am I anxious? Am I disorganized? Am I secure? And their attachment style with Allah, which I loved. And they found correlations where, look, the people who had good self-worth, so you can imagine their hearts are at rest and they trust their hearts, and good self-image. Like, I know I'm fully human. I know I'm worthy, right? I know I don't deserve to be treated with any form of indignity by a man or otherwise, right? They also had a benevolent image of God. They knew he was merciful. They were not like so fearful of making mistakes and missteps. And they had more secure attachment styles from childhood, and they had a secure attachment with Allah. So it's like, I'm okay, I'm good, Allah's good, everything's good. And the opposite was true. Those who had a bad opinion of themselves or saw themselves as unworthy, and that also goes with the des, right? The oppression of the self, opposite of tazkiyah. Also had a punitive image of God, afraid of him, afraid of his punishment. They had insecure attachments with other people and with God. And so I could see suddenly why maybe someone who is on a prayer mat cannot focus. Yeah, you're in avoidance. I am so afraid of you, God, that I'm avoiding you. I don't pray because I'm so scared and I'm so hurt. And how would Allah look at someone? Allah understands psychology. He understands trauma. He was with that baby when that baby was abandoned, with that girl when she was told she can't read the Quran. So then I felt, right, so Allah can like tolerate our distance. He can tolerate our tantrums. He can tolerate our, one of my children, when he was young, if he was mad at me, he'd say things like, you didn't treat me well, I hate you, I'm never going to speak to you, I'm never going to hug you, and he'd walk away, like in his cute onesie pajamas, like with the diaper still there. Of course, I want to burst out laughing, but I try not to laugh so that I don't hurt his feelings and his dignity. But for sure, he's going to have dinner, and I'm going to tuck him in. Like, he has not affected our relationship. And that's the type of safety that I have started to feel with Allah, and I've seen other men and women through their journey feel. Now, one important thing in the study is the God image that you have. Like, is he merciful, benevolent? Like the Prophet had said, he's like a mother who just found her child after she'd lost him in the middle of a war. Like, imagine that. So the people who saw the benevolent God versus those who saw the punitive, scary, hellfire God, it's affected by two things. The content you got, what people told you about God, who you got it from, but more than two things, who you got it from and how you got it, and your other relationships with authority figures. So if my father, whether he was religious or not, was scary, chances are I will feel other authorities like God scary. Now, if my father was scary and seemed religious, quote unquote, and he's the one who taught me Quran and hit me with a ruler when I made mistakes, sealed deal. It's going to take you a long time to unpack that, right? All of it became conflated. And like, how many women cannot, like, I swear, like, they're just this kind of, they get into a shell position and close their ears when they start hearing the beginning of a sermon, that maw'idah of the Shaykh's voice, because it's associated with a lot of pain. And this is the body goes into bloop. I want to get into my shell, and please change the channel or go to the next reel. This is real. And so we've referred now clearly to these two things for people to go back to. The study by Dr. Iman al-Badawi, or Shaykha Iman al-Badawi, on the Hadīth on women's intellect, and the Yaqeen Institute study. And I'm sure there's much more that I've kind of just touched upon. If you're uncomfortable, that's good. Discomfort is a sign of learning. You need to unlearn things before learning them. I'm sure I've made mistakes. I'm sure I am nothing but a traveler. Like, I have a map and I have a compass, and I'm in the middle of the road. And I trust Allah enough that it's okay. And that we're actually doing what we're supposed to do by asking these questions. Like, this is tadarus. This is us helping each other find the path. So, I don't know, Noura. How do you want to wrap this up?
lovely. I feel like I'm wrapping up in a place where I want to explore more and talk more and know more, which is why we thought of just of doing this on 2 episodes, so that this episode just put out what we're thinking about our conversations, and probably conversations that people have with each other. So we just put it out here, and inshallah, this is just hopefully a promise that we're going to be able to do another episode that is going to be a continuation. Some more maybe ways of healing, some more a bit of going into the, or we talked a lot about the problem. How can different ways of healing happen, and a lot of them happen in the therapy room as well. So I think it's a beautiful place to wrap up here, and I'm going to be putting all the links in the show notes, and as well any links for you where people can find you. We're going to be able to add them,
Inshallah. Thank you. I look forward to hearing this, and to part 2 where we get into more practical, inshallah, and healing solutions. And thank you for the idea. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you.